Archaeology is full of incredible discoveries, but what about the ones that don't make the mainstream headlines? Today, I'm revealing 5 of the most mysterious finds you've probably never heard of, from sunken skulls in a prehistoric Swedish lake to an ancient computer that redefines our assumptions about the past. Each of these discoveries raises more questions than answers, pulling us deeper into the unknown. If you are truly interested in human history, then stick around because these hidden gems might just blow you away. We're starting our journey in the land of the Vikings, but at a time much more ancient. Thousands of years before Vikings ruled northern Europe, groups of hunter-gatherers roamed Scandinavia in search of food and survival. Although these people were nomadic and may be seen as primitive by our modern standards, their cultures were actually quite complex. At a recently discovered site in Sweden, archaeologists have unearthed a story of that cultural complexity. The site is called Canal Jordan, and it consists of a small lake north of the river connecting Lake Boren to the east and Lake Vättern to the west. The landscape includes a low-sloping hill, some wetlands, and the lake itself. The shores of the river and the lake were occupied by hunter-gatherers between 8,000 and 7,000 years ago, during a time we call the Mesolithic. The Mesolithic, or Middle Stone Age, is the transitional period between the Paleolithic and Neolithic, characterized by the development of microlithic tools, increased reliance on diverse food resources, and the beginnings of sedentism in some regions. Archaeologists conducted excavations of the area from 2009 to 2013. What they found was brutally fascinating yet mildly chilling. An area of the lake was packed with stone. It measured about 12 by 14 meters, and within it were wooden stakes, stone and antler tools, and animal remains. More than half a dozen different species were found, including brown bears, red deer, wild boar, and even moose. But the most interesting animal specimens were the disarticulated human remains. 34 human elements were found, and narrowed down to 10 different individuals. Based on analyses of their bones and teeth, we know they ranged in age from a single infant to 9 fully grown adults, ages 20 and up. The researchers of the site note how strange this is alone, saying the discovery of selected remains of 10 Mesolithic individuals deposited on a man-made stone structure underwater is unique. But it gets even weirder. The skulls were intentionally removed from the bodies, and the jaws were sometimes removed from the skulls. This is not typical of Mesolithic European burials, whereby unaltered bodies symbolically represent the integrity of personhood. The skulls also show evidence of trauma before and or around the time of death. The location of this trauma differs between the sexes, with females experiencing the trauma to the back and right side of the head, and males only to the top or front. Lastly, 2 of the skulls were mounted on wooden stakes. So what does all this tell us about these prehistoric Scandinavians? What are we observing here? The authors of this study present a few possible scenarios. The skulls could be evidence of intergroup violence via raiding or warfare, but it is not possible to identify any weapons used. The different wound patterns between males and females could then reflect different gender roles in combat. Other explanations include ceremonial rituals, or even that the skulls could have been trophies as part of an exchange system. Aside from these speculations, we don't have a good grasp of the cultural significance behind this site. The creation of the stone structure and its associated artifacts and human remains was carefully planned and executed, according to the researchers. They go on to say, the contextual circumstances at Canal Jordan indicate that the deposits were structured and consciously arranged. The events do not appear to be random, but rather a series of conscious choices. This site is truly shrouded in mystery. The material evidence tells us that the people here made the conscious decision to embark on whatever ritual that took place. But what was it? What cultural story were these hunter-gatherers playing out? Before moving on to the next site, I want to guide your attention to a resource that might help you with your own interests in archaeology. I've curated a reading list on my website with my favorite books on archaeology and human evolution. Some are more advanced, looking into the evolution of human perception, while others are more digestible, exploring the wonders of historical archaeology in the United States. If you like my content, then these books should be added to your Amazon carts. They've influenced my videos immensely. They've also influenced my upcoming ebook, which will be an essential resource for people learning about archaeology online. I will keep you guys updated with the release date for that. Now, let's shift our focus to another intriguing site, this time in Turkey. High upon a rugged ridge in southeastern Turkey lies a landscape both stark and mesmerizing. This is the Şanlıurfa province, a place where time itself seems to have stood still. The rolling terrain is marked by rocky outcrops, undulating hills, and shallow valleys dotted with hardy grasses and shrubs that cling to life in the arid soil. In the distance, patches of olive trees and fields of wheat speak to the agricultural revolution that began here thousands of years ago. Yet, it is the stone that dominates this landscape. Stone outcrops shaped by eons of wind and rain, their pale surfaces gleaming under the relentless sun. The air is dry, and in the summer months, the heat can be merciless, baking the earth until it cracks. It was within this ancient, unforgiving environment that the builders of the world's earliest megalithic structures carved their vision into bedrock, leaving behind monuments that whisper of a world long forgotten. That world has been reignited, though, with the recent efforts of archaeologists, notably at Göbekli Tepe, a site most of you have probably heard of. While Göbekli Tepe has captured the world's attention as humanity's so-called first temple, another site, not too far away, has remained in its shadow, Karahan Tepe. Often overlooked, this site is just as fascinating and possibly even more enigmatic. Located in the same region of southeastern Turkey, Karahan Tepe dates back to the same pre-pottery Neolithic period, around 11,000 years ago. The site offers a unique glimpse into the symbolic and spiritual lives of one of humanity's most ancient cultures. Karahan Tepe's ruins take up about 325,000 square meters, as far as we're aware of. Despite large excavations, much of the site is surely still buried. This is obvious when looking at the surrounding landscape. The artifacts and structures are so prominent that it is almost difficult to differentiate the natural rock, stone tools, and pillar tops you're walking on. Of what has been excavated, it is believed that the site consists of 4 sectors. The largest is structure AD. It's about 23 meters in diameter, oval in shape, and carved into the limestone bedrock, which is a common feature of Karahan Tepe, distinguishing it from Göbekli Tepe. Adjacent to structure AD, to its east, is another bedrock carved feature called structure AB, which is much smaller, only about 7 by 6 meters. To its east is structure AA, the shallowest of the 3, with a near trapezoidal shape. Lastly, structure AC is separate from this building complex, sitting about 20 meters northeast. Each sector is fascinating in and of itself, and the interconnection between AA, AB, and AD suggests a sense of unity between their architectural elements, or functions. That said, structure AB seems to be the most enigmatic and controversial. This subterranean space contains multiple symbolic elements. Most obvious are the 10 phallus-shaped pillars, which were carved from the bedrock. One pillar was shaped separately and brought in from the outside, totaling 11 pillars. Their phallus shape led to the interpretation that the room was used for fertility rituals. If you look at the ridge lining the upper rim of the space, you'll find the other key symbol. A human head carved into this ridge extends into the center of the room. It has a protruding forehead, noticeably thick lips, and a beard. It also turns slightly toward the entrance to the room. Taking these symbols into consideration, lead archaeologist Necmi Karul says, the present evidence strongly suggests a ceremonial process, entering the building from one end and exiting at the other end, having to parade in the presence of the human head, featuring a phallic symbolism. Nevertheless, our preliminary interpretation will evidently be further elaborated after the excavation of this complex structure is completed and relevant findings analyzed. He also argues, which seems to be the case for Göbekli Tepe as well, that the site was intentionally buried. It is clear that although burying a structure means vacating a building or venue, it is a practice that requires a lot of time and effort. This means more than just abandonment. As a result, the idea that the construction, useful lifespan, and burial of the building are parts of the same ritual that deserves further discussion. These observations and interpretations are just the tip of the iceberg. Deciphering the mysteries of Karahan Tepe will require much more research. How did people build such massive structures at the very earliest stages of sedentary life? What was the true purpose of structure AB? And why was the site buried if it was so symbolically important to the fertility of the culture who built it? These are the questions that need answers, yet they are simultaneously the questions that may never get answered. What do you think Karahan Tepe was all about? Let me know in the comments below. In archaeology, we often throw around the word ritual as a placeholder to explain things we don't yet understand, like at Karahan Tepe. However, some past cultures and archaeological sites have yielded enough information for us to outline the specifics of their rituals. This is the case for some of the feasts of the ancient Andes in South America. The Inca are the most widely known pre-Columbian culture of the Andes. They created iconic megalithic structures, and I'll leave a link to a video I made on them in the description. Within communal areas of these megalithic cities, the Inca participated in feasts. These were state-sponsored gatherings which the Spaniards witnessed and observed the large quantities of maize beer being consumed. The Inca liked to party, apparently. They were hosted by the ruler, or local elites, and consisted of hundreds or thousands of individuals from across the empire. The feasts were largely instituted to reinforce the hierarchical order of Inca society, which was stratified between state elites and common folk. In doing so, elites were seated in prominent positions, emphasizing their authority, while commoners participated as recipients of the state's offerings. By providing lavish feasts, the state displayed its power and generosity, ensuring loyalty among subjects. It was a ritual used to maintain and perpetuate the established order. 700 years before the Inca, the Wari culture occupied the Andes of Peru, and they participated in feasts of their own. Their feasts differed in multiple ways. First, their feasts were performed in private spaces rather than public. Second, only a few dozen individuals attended Wari feasts, because these spaces were smaller. Third, smaller events indicate a more intimate mood or ambiance compared to Inca feasts. Fourth, the food was prepped closer to the place of eating. Fifth, there was a greater emphasis on individual families contributing to the food and beverages consumed. Lastly, and crucially, different beverages were consumed. They served maize beer similar to the Inca, but they also served a hallucinogenic beer. By adding a psychoactive plant called vilca to a beer made from the mole plant, the Wari concocted a powerful hallucinogen. Its consumption was an important aspect of Wari feasting, says researcher Justin Jennings and colleagues. They go on to say, Inca revelers got drunk, but their Wari counterparts got drunk and high. The small confined spaces of Wari feasts may have been more amenable to the group's psychotropic journey. Jennings and colleagues have conducted archaeological analyses at the Wari site of Quilcapampa. They show how mole drupes are abundant at the site, with over 1 million specimens recovered, 99% of which possess properties of having been steeped for brewing. Vilca is less abundant, only found in contexts directly related to feasts, and was not native to Quilcapampa. The inhabitants would have procured these seeds via long-distance llama caravans that circulated throughout the era's road networks. Nevertheless, the Wari of Quilcapampa acquired vilca, and its chemical combination with mole was what gave beer the ability to elicit powerful hallucinations when consumed orally. The social differences and the addition of psychedelic substances point to a very different feasting experience in the Wari when compared to the later Inca. It's argued that Wari feasts were less geared toward solidifying hierarchies and more about building social bonds through shared experiences. And part of that experience was the big ceramic smashing finale, which is seen in the archaeological record. The high walls, narrow corridors, and confined space of the Wari compounds only intensified the intimacy of these events, which culminated in the smashing of drinking cups and the scattering of spent drupes across the floor. The cornucopia of sights, sounds, smells, tastes, and feelings of these feasts would have made for powerful and memorable experiences. While the material remains in the archaeological record tell us how the Wari people used their private spaces for these rituals, understanding their hallucinogenic experiences poses an immense challenge. What sorts of visions did they have, and in what ways did they connect people? Reconstructing such experiences seems like an impossible feat, but with advances in AI and virtual reality in the coming decades, who knows what facets of our past we will be able to experience ourselves. I'd like to stay hopeful about this area of research in the world of archaeology. As an archaeologist in the eastern United States, I can assure you there's no lack of mystery hidden in this part of the world. Despite all of the exploration, development, and documentation of the eastern seaboard, there are still so many questions. One question that still stands today, which is one of the most controversial, is who built America's Stonehenge? Yes, America has its own Stonehenge. Is it as ancient as the widely known Stonehenge in England? That's part of the controversy. So let's see what we know about it thus far. Unfortunately, there isn't too much documentation on this site, which is why it's probably the least known archaeological discovery in this video. That's also why it's rather difficult to make solid interpretations about it. Most of what we know is from reports of avocational archaeologists and independent researchers. Calling the site America's Stonehenge might implant an inaccurate portrait in the mind of the listener, one similar to that across the Atlantic. However, this site is much different. Located on Mystery Hill in Salem, New Hampshire, it doesn't consist of stoneworks quite as large as those in England, and its plan is much more irregular. According to researcher Mary Gage, whose writings seem to be the most extensive I could find, this stone complex consists of 6 different styles of architecture. They include the following: low wall, constructed using low, narrow stone walls; tall wall, consisting of thick, long, tall walls with low chambers; crawl in and walk in. These are simply chambers of heights where you must crawl or can walk into, respectively. Open front refers to chambers with wide fronts and completely exposed interiors. And lastly, slab walls, chambers built with large vertical stones. The mystery of this Hills stone architecture deals with who built it and when. Various theories exist, and the most controversial is the idea that pre-Columbian Bronze Age Celts or seafaring Druids made it to the Americas and are responsible for this. Archaeologist Curtis Runnels has countered these claims, saying, "No Bronze Age artifacts have been found here. In fact, no one has found a single artifact of European origin from that period anywhere in the New World." Since there is no evidence of Bronze Age material, who can America's Stonehenge be attributed to? Well, there are 2 possibilities. It was either constructed by Native Americans or more recent people of European origin. Excavations were conducted in 1955 by Gary Vesalius, who came away with the conclusion that the structure was built by Jonathan Patee, who lived on the property between 1820 and 1849. However, those same excavations show that the ground was very disturbed, containing a mixture of trash from Patee's time of residence as well as artifacts from the later 1930s. Radiocarbon dates have been recovered from the site, but they too are somewhat inconclusive. Some of the earliest dates are from over 6,000 years ago, but archaeologists are unsure if the charcoal from which these dates came is natural or the product of Native American habitation. A fire pit that was most likely of Native American origin produced a radiocarbon date of roughly 3,600 years ago. Numerous other samples contain dates spanning up until the modern period. From what I can tell, the site is still up for interpretation. These earliest radiocarbon dates could represent Native American construction. However, there's no definitive association between said dates and the structure itself. And being that Patee did live here, it's not out of the realm of possibility that he built the structure on top of land that was once inhabited by indigenous people long before him. All in all, more extensive and rigorous studies are needed to make truly decisive conclusions. YouTube is chock full of videos about lost ancient technologies, most of which are speculative at most and not backed by hard evidence. This does not mean, however, that we can be tyrannical about our understanding of the past and assume that we know the full extent of ancient technology. One discovery in particular has shown us precisely why we must keep our minds open to the idea that ancient civilizations were much more advanced than we think. The Antikythera shipwreck was discovered in 1900 by sponge divers off the coast of the small Greek island of Antikythera. While seeking shelter during a storm, the divers explored the seabed and stumbled upon a massive ancient shipwreck at a depth of 42 meters, or 140 feet. Among the cargo, they found a trove of treasures, including bronze and material statues, pottery, and other artifacts, believed to date from the 1st century BC. These objects were brought to the surface with great difficulty under challenging diving conditions, and eventually delivered to the Greek government for study and preservation. Amid the recovered artifacts was a set of corroded bronze fragments, which initially went unnoticed. However, in 1902, researchers at the National Archaeological Museum in Athens identified them as part of an intricate mechanism. Now known as the Antikythera Mechanism, this device is a sophisticated analog computer that could predict astronomical events, including eclipses and planetary motions. Its complexity, featuring precision-engineered gears with teeth measured in millimeters, far exceeded anything previously thought possible in the ancient world. The shipwreck dates to around 70 BC, yet some propose it could be as old as 200 BC. Geared mechanisms like this weren't believed to exist until centuries later. Small inscriptions were also observed on the artifact. The inscriptions on the front consisted of details regarding 5 planets, including Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. The inscriptions on the back were essentially a user manual for the device. These helped give context to those trying to interpret its function, which is most likely an astronomical calculator. The artifact also tracks the sun and moon and had the ability to predict eclipses. The device is unique among discoveries from its time. It single-handedly rewrites our knowledge of the technology of the ancient Greeks, says researcher Tony Freeth. He goes on to say, "We knew that they were highly capable. They built the Pantheon and the Lighthouse of Alexandria even earlier than the Antikythera mechanism. They had plumbing and used steam to operate equipment. But before the discovery of the Antikythera mechanism, ancient Greek gears were thought to be restricted to crude wheels in windmills and water mills. The discovery not only shed light on an ancient shipwreck, but also sparked a reevaluation of ancient Greek science and engineering. The Greeks made astute observations about the cosmos around them, and they documented that understanding through advanced metallurgy. These were just some of the archaeological discoveries that don't often make it to the mainstream. Was this your first time hearing about any of them? Plenty more are hidden in the ground waiting to be unearthed. For a video on some more popular and well-documented archaeological sites, check out this video mentioned on the megalithic architecture of the Americas. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support the channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Stay curious.